I'm Alyssa Rosenberg, the host of Critic Proof and the culture blogger at Think Progress, and I'm a columnist at Slate in the Atlantic. And I'm here today with my favorite person to complain about how terrible television is over GChat.
Hi, I'm Willa. I'm the TV critic at Salon. I also enjoy complaining with Alyssa about how bad television is, but maybe we'll try to find something we don't hate in this new TV season.
There's, I think, one thing in this that we are slated to talk about in this podcast that we do not completely and utterly hate. So we've got something going for us. But I wanted to start off by talking about a couple of things that we do, which include sort of this fall's crop of sitcoms, which started airing mostly on NBC this week. And thinking about these, I realized that if I were a guy, I would be really, really angry about this television season because sort of one of the first sitcoms to come out, Guys with Kids, which started airing last night on NBC, is sort of this portrait of men raising their young as if it's super exciting. And then you have all of these shows, including The New Normal, that have and Ben and Kate, which starts on Fox next week, that picture guys who are basically just so useless that the women abandon them or that they run off at the first sight of, like, pregnancy and childbirth. So Guys with Kids is actually, like, if you're a dude on television, Guys with Kids is actually a high water mark for you.
Well, it's interesting because it's not actually that much worse than it was last year.
Sure.
I think that some of those shows, those shows last year were a little bit angrier. So this is a little bit more hapless dude as opposed to hapless and frustrated and actively pissed off dude, which was sort of, which is the Tim Allen show Last Man Standing, which was sort of Work It and a bunch of the, and How to Be a Gentleman, these shows that got canceled. The other thing is also that that's not, that's very like the Judd Apatow thing. It's like these sort of hapless 20, 30-something, 40-somethings who sort of refuse to grow up. So, I agree that there is, what's sort of interesting to me about it more than that is that between this year and last year, TV, as opposed to movies, seems very aggressively to be unembarrassed about trying to appeal exclusively almost to female viewers in a way that, the bridesmaid phenomenon is such a phenomenon because movies are so disinclined to do that.
But in a way, I think some of these sitcoms are kind of looking at these Judd Apatow stock characters instead of from the perspective of men. These aren't shows about boy slackers who, get a girl pregnant or realize that they want to grow up and make efforts to be a man and make mistakes along the way. In a lot of these shows, these guys are just useless. In Ben and Kate, this super charming, this is a show we liked. This is something we liked. This sitcom that starts next week, the main character, we see her in this flashback basically getting pregnant as a teenager, and she tells the father of her child, I'm pregnant, and he says, I'm so excited, and then, runs out of the car where they're having the conversation. He,
right.
He doesn't do the whole knocked up thing where he's like, I want to be responsible and stay with this lady. He just freaks out and runs away.
Sure, but her brother, of course, ends up sticking around. All of those shows, it's weird because there's 3 shows that have that exact same single mom, no dad premise, like Ben and Kate, New Normal, and How to Live with Your Family.
How to Live with Your Parents.
Right, How to Live with Your Parents for the rest of your life. And they all have delinquent husbands or baby daddies, but there does end up being someone, even if it's an outsized, an overgrown man-child that is in their life, whether it's, a stepfather or, the gay couple in The New Normal or...
Sure, but it's very much like, we will build families. These ladies are almost like running off to communes. They're not replacing the fathers of their children with people that they would want to have sex with or more kids with.
It's
like
absolutely
these people are almost appropriate surrogates precisely because the gay couple in The New Normal is never going to have sex with Goldie. She will have a baby for them, but she doesn't have to have any sort of sexual contact with them much whatsoever. It's as if, sex makes straight men dumb and unfit fathers.
Well, also, it's sort of interesting because none of the guys that are the people who knock them up are super sexual. I guess the one in The New Normal is sort of a Lothario, but the other ones, it's not like you understand what was so hot about those other guys to begin with. Along these lines, I was actually thinking that Joel from Parenthood is basically the only guy on TV that is simultaneously cool and super adult and, like, maybe you would want to have sex with. Like, of everyone, you know, like, even on Parenthood, you know, Adam is not really cool and Crosby is not really adult. And there's almost nobody else.
I do feel like it's interesting how 30 Rock has kind of, like, I mean, Jack Donaghy is sort of the totally rare corporate single dad on television. And one of the things that's actually been funny is watching him, like, be good with his baby, you know?
Yeah, although Jack is not, I totally agree. Actually, I hadn't thought about him. That's totally true. But he is also, you know, I mean, he's not, I mean, he's had a lot of girlfriends, but he's not quite like a romantic figure in the same way that some of these sitcom guys.
I mean, he's not like a CW, he's not CW hot. He's like old rich guy hot.
Yeah, that's true. Right, he's not in this stable of 14-year-old guys who are really, really jacked. Although young Alec Baldwin could have been on a CW show.
Oh, young Alec Baldwin. A girl can dream,
Not to go off on a crazy tangent. Were we talking about guys with kids? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, let's go back to guys. Well, we sort of were talking about everything, but let's go back to guys with kids, which I think is maybe the worst.
It's just so lame. It's so lame. It's embarrassing for Jimmy. I just feel like it's not the worst. I find it so... It's not really offensive, honestly. I think they tried very hard not to be offensive. It's about these men and their children, but it's just
very embarrassing, right? I mean, at the Television Critics Association press tour, Jimmy Fallon is, you know, appearing via satellite. It's like, we discovered that there are these men in New York who are raising children. It's like it was a huge discovery for them. And apparently the pitch for the show came up with him, like, coining the term DILFs. Which is, I mean, it's so embarrassing, right? It's so embarrassing on so many levels.
No,
that's what the show is like.
It's also just because there is a good show in that premise, you know? Like, but sure, and everyone in that show is, like, so surprised that they have kids. You know, like, you're like, right. Let me see, like, if the guy is, so one of the characters has 4 children and he's a stay-at-home dad. It's like, by the time the stay-at-home dad has 4 kids, like, he's not really fazed by any of this or, like, look at me, this is so crazy, I'm like a weird anthropological specimen. He's like rolling with it.
And he's played by Anthony Anderson, who is, you know, just a fabulous dramatic actor, and I'm sure is doing this because, you know, he got grown man bills to pay. But, you know, he's playing this guy who's like so clueless that his kids wander off. Or like, you know, he and his wife didn't even have a television despite the fact that they live in what's apparently a pretty nice New York apartment building. It's sort of this like, it's like they had building blocks of little sort of tropes. It's like, married couples don't have sex anymore. Let's put that block down. Let's put, like, raising children is tired. And it's like, they're like, the show is like toddlers building a block tower out of sort of stereotypes about raising children.
Yep. And also, the other thing is that it is very much, it sort of seems to me like the way that TV is really bifurcated right now, where there's, like, the people that are trying, like, actually trying, and then the people that are just still trying to do the same thing. And so the Guys with Kids is very much, you know, it's like basically a CBS sitcom where it's like, we want to be this escapist thing that is going to be taxing to nobody in any way, and you can have on in the background while you're making dinner, and that totally serves a function. But it's just like in the context, certainly of NBC's stable of comedies, but just even in anything that's good, you can just feel how lazy it is. It's just so lazy. And also that laugh track situation, which I know is now taped in front of a live studio audience. Have you seen like the most recent one? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Which like it makes me laugh, like, because basically it's essentially just because like with the whole thing that happened with Whitney last year, where everyone was like, why would you have canned laughter? And they had to prove that it was actually being taped in front of a live studio audience. But it just rankles me so much because it's like, you just made everyone fake laugh at your jokes. Like, I don't actually care if you canned it or if you artificially made your audience do whatever. They're bad, and it's really weird to hear people laughing at bad jokes. I mean, it's just not...
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, is that, you know, you sort of have this category of shows that isn't trying anymore, but also that sort of wants to be the thing that you have on while you're, like, cooking dinner or drinking a glass of wine. And I think there's something really interesting about this sort of... I feel like there's almost a division between a show like Guys with Kids and Chicago Fire, which is Dick Wolf's, like, hot firemen save people in Chicago.
Third watch for us again.
Right. And so a show like Guys with Kids, you can sort of see NBC's contempt for the audience that it thinks it will attract in it. I mean, the jokes are really basic. The show doesn't look very good, which, I mean, just maybe me having a bias against multi-camera shows and the sort of obvious artificiality of the sets. You know, but the performances aren't that good. The characters don't really hang together. It's a show that sort of looks and feels both intellectually and financially cheap. So also Chicago Fire.
Yeah, go ahead. No, tell me about Chicago Fire. Because I was just going to say, the thing is just that it's weird how they've perfected this sort of procedural, basically drama procedurals, even though they're by the book. There's something very satisfying about them, like Law and Order, and I'll let you finish about Chicago Fire, and that basically sitcoms, you can't do them that well and do paint by the numbers. Humor's harder.
Right. No, I think that's true. And what I was going to say sort of about Chicago Fire is that it's basic, but it's not dumb. I mean, the actors are relatively good. You've got, Jesse Spencer from House. You have the actor whose name I will never remember, but who is Steve from Sex and the City. You have sort of a basic baseline of performances. And then you have special effects that look pretty good and fires that are exciting. The whole thing doesn't feel like an insult to our intelligence. It's basic, but it's not stupid. It's satisfying, but it's not cheap. And I feel like comedy doesn't really know how to do that. Right? Well, I mean...
Certainly. I mean, it might just be that it's sort of hard to do. I mean, it's really hard to think of a sitcom that walks that line. I mean, because, I'm sure someone would say that about Friends, but, I think Friends is, masterful and amazing. So...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and I think people assume that what made Friends, or sort of what made must-see TV good, was something really obvious, right? It's like, if we just put people in an apartment building together, which is part of the premise of Guys with Kids, that these fathers who are raising children are doing it all together in the same apartment building, so they're in and out of each other's houses. That's not really what makes Friends, though. I mean, it doesn't matter that much if the characters in Friends had to walk across the street.
Right, the issue with comedies is sort of they just have to be funny. Are they funny or not? It's sort of like a live or die thing. So... And basically, it seems like by the time a team is putting in the real effort to make it funny, it's a different kind of show. That takes a ton of work. That's really, really hard. I'm not saying that they're not trying. It's just it doesn't seem like they are.
Well, and there's no comedy equivalent of the procedural, right? With drama, what matters is the bones. And then the execution is extra, right? I mean, The Good Wife is technically a procedural
right, and it's exactly the reverse in comedies, right? All that matters is the execution.
The bones don't matter at all, and it's all the details
and the character
execution.
Stuff. Yeah, totally.
And I think people and I think we're seeing a lot of people trying to sort of find bones for comedy and skimping on the execution. I mean, I think Guys with Kids is very much a bones show. It's we have this setup that should be funny. The idea that men are raising children, which is really sort of a structure thing, should be inherently funny, but it's not. The idea that all of these people live in the building together should make this work.
I mean, the thing about comedies is they all end up reducing essentially to a group of people who are friends. Not all, or some, surrogate family. That's, I mean, maybe not all, but that's a huge majority of them. So it's something like Guys with Kids, does have a premise, but it's not that high concept, it's not one of them turns into a dog every minute thing.
It's also not a premise that drives story, right? So, people being friends or people living together is a situation, it's not an event. A dead body is an event. It is a problem that has to be solved. And, that doesn't exist in the sort of equivalent comedy structures. I mean, I think the one structure this season that does sort of provide that kind of, here's some forward momentum, or here's a thing that happens, is NBC's Go On, which I think I like somewhat more than you do.
I actually think... but this is a thing also about, just to back up a second, just about all these shows, which is that this is why it's so ridiculously hard to tell about comedies, especially from the first episode, because... Dramas, it is about the structure, so you have an idea of what they're going to look like, and comedies are just only about chemistry. So it's they're just about chemistry, which they don't have, but they might not have it immediately, some Parks and Rec was a bad show for a while. So Go On, I don't I didn't think it was perfect or anything, but I liked enough of the people involved, and I thought that the premise was kind of low key enough, you're all going to get together in a room for them,
right.
It could
but
work.
The fact is that structure, you're all going to get together in a room because Go On is a show about Matthew Perry's character, who's a radio host who's lost his wife and is attending a support group. And so the fact that you get them all together in a room, that there is a meeting, there is something that takes place, people talk, and then the execution can be whatever the specific thing is. But that at least is a structure that sort of drives an event every week. But yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it's a show that it's relying really hard on Matthew Perry right now, which is too bad, because I actually think there are a lot of people in the cast who are at least as interesting as he is.
But you know what's interesting about that, just to talk about something that's really not, but just talk about ratings for a second? Which is that show has by far had the most viewers of any of NBC's new shows yet. I mean, it may not last. And it is...
What was it, 9.7 million people?
Yeah, and it is because of Matthew Perry in this way that's I wouldn't have necessarily predicted that it would have a lot more people than the new normal, although maybe I should have, right. or guys with kids. But it's he's a real... In a funny way, it's I agree that it's relying on him heavily, but that's also, that's, especially at the beginning, I think is sort of what people want to see, or not, I think that in a weird way, that is
and carry it on his back for half the season.
Or that speaks to people's, the part of them that wants to, turn it on while they're making TV and have a glass of wine. They trust that guy, he's gonna take care of them and it's gonna be fine to watch, sort of.
Yeah, and I think what actually makes me optimistic for the show is if people get in the door for that, there's a lot else that's there.
Yeah.
I think Julie White's character on Go On may be my favorite character of the new television season.
We've G-chatted about this, but I want you to tell me more again, because I forgot.
Yeah, because, so she's this, her character has real anger issues, and she's a lesbian, and she's widowed, and the fact that she's a widowed lesbian is a new character on television. We're starting to see gay married couples, gay couples with kids, but we're not seeing that many older gay people who are dealing with end of life stuff. And that, doesn't sound, I feel like that doesn't sound like a big deal, but I kind of think it is, in part because obviously she's a gay character who's sort of in this tragic situation, but she's not in a tragic situation because she's gay.
Right.
Her partner was dumb about taking her heart medication and died of heart disease. And it's I think the most normally a gay character has ever been treated on American television. But also the fact that she's just this spiky, angry, kind of mean person is there's no real effort to make her likable or anything. It's just, she feels much more like a person to me than any of the characters on, say, The New Normal, which is the sort of big gay show this year.
Yeah. She is weirdly kind of likable. In that way that thing where they don't pay, when they don't try so hard, sometimes it works. If they're not total jerks, sometimes all you want is a little, they're negging you, the viewer. They're running the game on us.
Yeah. I like that. But yeah, I think she's really good. I think, and I'm going to forget his name, the kid who was on...
Everybody Loves Chris.
Everybody hates Chris. Everybody hates Chris. Hates Chris.
Opposite.
He's a really good actor. I like the character of Fausta, this sort of older Latina lady who, I think has lost a lot of her family, is the idea. She's sort of the rare character where... And, I was thinking about this today. She speaks Spanish on the show and they don't subtitle her, but they also don't make, either the fact that she speaks Spanish or that she has an accent a huge joke. It's just when she speaks Spanish, she's speaking Spanish, and if you can follow along, that's great. And, maybe there's a little sort of interpretation happening around her. But, it's this, there's just a lot of stuff there to work with. And we haven't even talked about Laura Benanti,
who you think is not very good in it, right? But I love.
Yeah, tell me why you love Laura Benanti,
so I just...
who has been... At least does not have to wear a Playboy bunny costume.
That's true. There's her and there's Sutton Foster and there's actually a number of people on Grey's Anatomy who are these extremely talented, really successful Broadway actresses who can sing and dance and do crazy things. Laura Benanti has won Tonys for being Gypsy. Gypsy Rose Lane was amazing. So I have faith that there's a there with her. I thought she was by far the best thing about Playboy Club, which I mean, is damning with faint praise, except, like, I thought she was actually pretty okay on the Playboy Club, which is, like, extremely difficult, because that show was just such a, you know, atrocity. And so I just, you know, I just like her. I have, like, goodwill towards her. You know, I mean, I wouldn't sort of go to bat necessarily for that character, but I just, like, find her extremely likable. So I'm willing to, like, see how that goes. And I think in the part, she also surprised me because she had a little bit more flakiness and sweetness than she sort of did, certainly in Playboy Club and in some other things. And I thought that would maybe be a nice match for Matthew Perry as they go down their inevitable, you know, romantic road or whatever.
Well, and I thought the first episode was interesting because, you know, Perry sort of doesn't take Benanti, who's the facilitator of his therapy group, particularly seriously, and he kind of uncovers the fact that she is a fraud, she's not really a licensed therapist.
Right.
And even when she turns out to be right about him needing to be in a group, he kind of blows off her suggestions. And so I was really glad that in the second episode, in which he advises another member of the group to get a cat, and she ends up getting like 50 million cats, that he ended up just being really wrong. And that the show wasn't going to do a constant thing where it's like, he's a, you know, manic...
Right.
Whatever Matt Zoller-Sites called him.
Like, he's a grief savant. Sort of, like, he's always going to be right.
Right. And he's not.
Yeah.
I sort of liked that, you know. And I also like that montage in the episode where everyone's showing up to his house with these cats that have been foisted upon them. He's like, he's really screwed up. He's messed up absolutely everything. And I thought that was sort of wonderful.
No, I mean, I really, if I had to, like, I feel like this season is so lame-brained, basically. It's hard for me to get super excited about a lot, but I go on as solidly, like, in the middle to, like, pretty good, you know, certainly in comparison to some other things. Like, I think it could turn into a good show, basically.
Yeah, well, and it's also basically the show that Community was at the beginning, right? I mean, I think that's something that people sort of forget about Community when it became this sort of wild, experimental genius, but to be fair, like, not very accessible thing. And, you know, this is something that I feel really conflicted about saying because I love Community, and I think, you know, there are a lot of people doing very good work on it, not just Dan Harmon, which is a fact that sort of gets glossed over in the wailing and gnashing of teeth about him getting fired from Community. But Community started out as a show about a weird group of people who were brought together by extenuating circumstances. I mean, that was the concept for the show.
Yeah,
and
no. It's like it's like Community that could be a rating.
For normal people. It's Community if you liked the episode, you know, mixology certification, where everybody goes to a bar and sort of has different feelings about it. And that's a great episode of television. That's probably my favorite Community episode ever. And if they could if Go On could pull off the kind of basics of that, I think that would be a good show. I think that would be a show worth watching. And as much as people sort of valorize Community, it's okay to have stuff that's good and smart, but that you don't have to have a degree to keep up with. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that's true.
and I think that's what NBC kind of needs. I mean...
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about talking about what NBC needs is really, I feel everything. I mean, I feel for them genuinely. Like, I feel for them as a net. I feel for this corporate entity. I really do a little bit because it's just been such a disaster there for so long. But then, you know, you see this spate of shows and it's hard to feel bad for them because they're really bad. Like, and it just also is so exactly the thing you don't want to see, which is them chasing things that they think that have worked other places. So it's like Glee is a hit for Fox, so they're going to have the new normal, you know, like 2.5 Men is a hit for CBS, so they're going to have guys with kids. Lost was a hit for ABC, so they're going to get Revolution, and they're all like they're sort of watered down things. And I mean, on the other hand, the reason I do sort of feel extremely bad for them is like something like the Mindy Project, which Jay passed on. So the Mindy Project is Mindy Kaling's new show, which is going to be on Fox, and it's and Mindy Kaling is an actress who's been on The Office and a writer and who's written for them a lot and is very talented, multi-hyphenate, who, you know, pitched her show, which is a sort of a single lady show in the scheme of Girls or New Girl, about a sort of 20-something who has her professional life in order and her personal life is a disaster. She pitched it to NBC and they passed on it, which was, you know, seemed surprised. She was hurt by it, and it seemed surprising since she has this history with The Office. But on the other hand, you think about it, it's like the thing about that though, just to me, is just that that show would have fit in perfectly with NBC and nobody would have watched it. And she is so lucky that it's going to air after New Girl, where literally it's possible it could be a hit. Like, it's just one of those shows where it's like a good show that would be like up all night, a sort of good show that like 2 million people watch and critics and fans are trying to rescue. Or it might not work on Fox, but it has a much better chance. It's just like NBC is in this position where it's sort of, even the things that it does well aren't really going to help it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, though, that if it is a hit at Fox, NBC is still producing it. Like, it's,
They'll make money,
universal show. And so NBC will at least get a bunch of money out of that to experiment with. And,
totally, but...
I almost wonder if that's kind of what NBC needs to do right now, is sell shows to places that can make hits that will give them some cash to try and figure stuff out with, because... I mean, this lineup of shows is the first one that Bob Greenblatt, who's the programming head at NBC, kind of put together by his own self. And it's just like, he has no idea what he wants, right? I mean, there's no consistency between any of these shows. There's no theme, really.
And also, they're not good, more to the point. Like, be the smorgasbord of the world, but, like, make the show not suck.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Revolution, for example... What a poop show.
Let's talk about Revolution.
Let's talk about Revolution. I mean, so Revolution is a show. It's a drama, sort of very much in the Lost mode.
That is a thing it is.
It's a drama with a long mythology, and basically the premise is that all the electricity in the world goes out. We don't know why.
Except for in an African-American lady's basement.
Well, we'll get there. But basically, all the electricity in the world goes out, but not just like on the grid. Everything that is electronic stops working. So batteries stop working, cars stop working. If you had a generator in your house, it would stop working. Done.
Planes fall out of the sky.
Right. All that stuff. And it's sort of, so it's 15 years later, and we're in this, post-apocalyptic state. America is run by militias. Our heroes are living in, like, the Hunger Games, essentially, or, like, some Amish town where they,
I mean, it's the Revolutionary War. The title is meant to be literal.
Right. Like, that's what, I mean... And it's basically like, and then it's sort of at the end, as you were saying, of course, like someone has electricity and we have to figure it out. And electricity, by the way, you turn the electricity on because there's a locket that literally looks like it comes from like QVC or Avon that stores all, like if you plug this little locket in, like you can get on the computer. It's like the cheapest looking thing, and I know that's a really particular thing to harsh on, and I wrote a whole review about it that's all about this, but the thing about Revolution is, and these post-apocalyptic shows, is it's about creating a plausible world, and the world in Revolution is the most banal, boring, uninteresting version of this premise like you could possibly do. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff you could do if it's if it's the apocalypse, it's 15 years later, nothing works. And literally, there's no, even the junk, even like the stuff that they're all walking around in, it's like things from the 1950s. It's like camper trailers and ice cream cartons. It's like, show me like what you're doing with all the computers. Like, someone have armor made out of iPhones.
Self-sustaining hipsters in Brooklyn. That's,
yeah. Just like,
set it there. All the people with bees and chickens in their backyard will become gods.
Totally. Right, and it's just anodyne, like, all the way down. The actors are incredibly anodyne. The clothes they wear, what it looks like, what they're trying to do. I mean, the craziest thing to me in the pilot is it's basically, they're trying to run out, like, the heroine is essentially Katniss, basically. She's
fake Katniss. I'm calling her fake Katniss.
So fake Katniss. She's like a 16-year-old girl with an attitude problem who really wants to go out and see the world, even though the world's been taken over by really dangerous people who use swords, of course, because there's not enough guns left for everyone to have a gun.
Well,
and the only
by a black man who taxes people.
Right. And the only guns they have, you noticed, were like rifles, like as if handguns had been like, I just don't understand. Like, they're using the stuff we have on this earth right now. Like, someone would have an AK-47. I don't no, but they're all really old-timey, like, steampunk guns. But anyway, Gus Fring, a black man who works for the militia, comes to find her father, who sort of knows something about why the electricity goes out. He dies. Sorry, spoiler. Her brother gets taken instead. And so the sort of myth, like, the guiding plot point of this is, like, her on this quest, like, literally, like, it could be Lord of the Rings, to go find her brother. And that's fine. I know they're going to get to this other stuff, but I'm just like, it's a show about the electricity going out. I don't know. Maybe you could be looking for how to turn the electricity on. It doesn't seem like that complicated. And instead she's like running after her brother, who is legitimately the most boring character I think I've ever, like his defining characteristic is literally that he has asthma. Like, he's blonde and he wears a Henley t-shirt because there's millions of those in the world. Those are never...
They're both really boring, though. I mean,
so boring.
It's really weird to see this sort of high-concept show that basically has CW-level stupid pretty people.
Yes, totally. It does. And
it's just...
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fake Katniss, at least, like... No, fake Katniss is a disaster. I mean, the actress is just so blank. It's amazing. I do, however, I sort of like Zach Orth's character. And I've loved Zach Orth since he was like a homophobic jock and In and Out.
Pretty boy. He's a pretty boy.
Yeah, I mean, he's in that. He's in Music and Lyrics, where he's an evil television producer. Actually, I feel like this may be his karma for doing that. The entertainment gods have forced him. He mocked them, and they forced him to be in this television show. But his character is actually the sort of one... let's think about what this world would actually be like in a creative way, right? Because he's a former Google executive. I mean... So he's someone... Yeah, I mean,
that's
he's
true,
except
used to... He didn't think about it, and it just felt to me like that character was like so the J.J. Abrams... Like, it's just Hurley, right? It's like the kind of chubby guy who's gonna make jokes. I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Like, don't tell me... Like, I just like...
In a better show, that would be the starting point for an amazing main character. Someone who... Like, say, someone who was whose entire sort of identity and career relied on this sort of very fragile technological web, who then, ends up having to rely on people who have these alternative skills or something. That is a great premise for a show, but yeah, you're right. I mean, he's Hurley. He is... And also... There will be a golf course and a polar bear at some point.
Right, and also he's
already a private plane.
He's a super tech... Like, he's this guy who's super tech savvy. Super connected, like all of us. And literally, like, no one on this show is like, oh, God, I really miss the internet. I mean, it doesn't have to be the internet, but no one's like, I miss air conditioning. I miss, like, anything. I miss being able to talk to my mom on the phone. Like, literally, like, it's 15 years later, all these characters, like, existed before the fall, and they're just like, oh, it's cool. I mean, I know there's not enough time, but it's just, like, this yearning. I mean, this yearning for stuff that we used to have is really rich and interesting. I mean, there's also... maybe they'll get to it, but it seems also like there could be so much stuff about religion, because it's like, if technology stuff suddenly just disappeared, all this stuff we used to be able to do, it's like, it was magic, right? It's like, what's that quote? Right. Like, any, suitably advanced technology is like indistinguishable from magic. You're like,
from magic, yeah.
So it's like, there's just all this stuff, and they just leave it all out there. I mean, maybe they'll get to it, but it's like, also, Elizabeth Mitchell from Lost, who's Juliet on Lost, is in the pilot for a minute. She's the main character's mom when she's really little. It's like a flashback. And then she's not there for the rest of it, and she's supposedly dead. Now, this is like a pet peeve of mine, but like, I don't want to be able to use my TV IQ about how TV shows work to predict something about what's going to happen on the plot. Like, I don't want to know that person got written off because they got fired and then have to watch the show. So Elizabeth Mitchell is on this TV show. Her mother is not dead. I mean, like, tell me that her mother is in Chicago and they can't find her. But like, that's a crap surprise. Like, and that's just sort of like the kind of laziness that feels like it's in the whole thing. Which is like, if you want to make this world and make me buy in, like, please respect my intelligence and make this more interesting.
Well, there are other things that don't make sense. I mean, there are other things that don't make sense. The idea that there's this massive die-off, or like that the government fails. There's just, I mean, so much science fiction, and this is a pet peeve of mine, jumps forward to the post-apocalypse and skips the fall. Right. And the fall is where really interesting things happen, right? I mean, I actually feel like The Passage, Justin Cronin's... which is amazing. Vampire zombie novels, does so much. I mean, the best part of the novel is, we're holed up in the mountains and things are getting closer and we see this failing. We're sending people on a train across the country and this is our last hope. But there is some actual thought of the mechanics for what the downfall is. I mean, if electricity suddenly stopped working, the U.S. government would become so important, right? I mean, there would be centralized planning for how we kept food fresh and distributed it. I mean, the idea that that there would be this massive die-off and we'd fall apart into these militias, it's just like, how do you get there? How do you get there?
I guess to me, I felt like, I agree with you. I think that it's way more interesting to do that stuff. And have you read the 12, the second one, the second Justin Cronin book?
Not yet. No,
because it does more of this stuff, and it's great. It's great. But to me, the idea that, like, I mean, I guess that's the thing, is that the electricity going out would undermine actually every single thing that we do in this way that I could kind of believe the government could fall apart. But if you're going to, it's so total that it doesn't even seem like the show understands, like, the gravity of it. They're like, oh, this is a crazy premise. Literally nothing works. And then they're like, oh, but it's 15 years later, and, like, everyone's kind of making it work.
And it's not even that it's like the grid became fatally overburdened and burned out. It's that the laws of physics changed. And that's a stupid thing to tell people, right? I mean, if electricity stops working, we all die because we don't have electrical impulses in our brains, you know? It just, I mean... And then the fact that the sort of big reveal at the end of the pilot, which has been teased in all of these ads, is that somewhere in an African-American lady's basement, there is
her attic. I think it's her attic, actually.
Her attic. Okay. It's in a, in a non-regularly used floor of an African-American lady's home, there is electricity. It's like, it works there, but physics is fucked up everywhere else. You know, it's just...
Well, no, she has the QVC charm. It's not up there. It's like the little force field. Well... But I mean, I agree. It's totally insane. And also, like, I like it. They're like, they have electricity, but they're talking on, like, first level era modems. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have to dial up on the phone line and then, like, do weird code. And you're just like, I don't know, maybe it could be, like, it could be more modern. Well, like, if it's anything you want, it could be anything you want. Why does it have to be, like, an IBM interface?
Well, and we're sort of nitpicking it because, you know, it's self-evidently stupid. But in terms of sort of the larger storytelling, it means that they have decided to explore in great detail a premise that is self-evidently stupid instead of just sort of saying, this is a thing that's kind of dumb, but what we're going to explore are the larger consequences or the world. We're going to put aside solving this mystery and just have it be a condition that exists and that we have to deal with.
I mean, it fails the basic test of all fictional universes, which is like, yeah, they're stupid and they aren't real. And then, like, it's really interesting and you are like, cool, I don't care. Like, I suspended
you
my
can set
disbelief.
it aside. I don't mind sort of the first mover in the science fictional universe being dumb, but if the first mover is sort of there all the way through and what the point of the story ends up being, and it's dumb, then I'm not on board. I'm not okay.
Right, and also, and especially if it's boring, then you're like, well, then I'm really just going to think about why, like, why are there only solid colored t-shirts in your world? Like, I don't know. I think, like, everyone would be wearing, like, t-shirts with horrible, stupid sayings on them. The laws of colors went
crazy, Willa. The laws of colors went crazy.
the laws of colors broke. It's insane, along with physics. But I mean, it's funny because I just think, I actually, as I was watching it and thinking about it more, I was like, there's actually so much crazy, interesting stuff you could do with this. And I can't believe how much you didn't do. And it made me actually also feel sort of kindly towards The Walking Dead, which is, you know, AMC's zombie show, that has come in for a lot of criticism. I mean, I don't watch it faithfully. I understand the criticism, you know, that it's basically really boring and there aren't enough zombies. But say what you will about that show, you are in a universe with that show. Like, you feel something.
Yeah, and it's
hot
so
and
scary.
Sweaty, and it's scary, and it's like you feel the dread, and you're just like, that's a cool thing that a TV show can do, and that it can make you feel that way. And then you watch Revolution, and you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm like in a Gap commercial, I guess. I don't know, like on a farm.
Well, and it's a show that basically isn't interested in trying to turn back the tide. It's a show that's about surviving in this world where there are these rules and these resources available, as opposed to trying to untangle some zombie thing. You know, it's... And if it was a show about, like, trying to manufacture a virus or explain how the virus spread or whatever, it would be sort of transparently implausible and annoying. But when it's a show about sort of holing up on a farm, you know, or traveling in a camper somewhere, the boredom can be a kind of dread, you know? It's... There are arguments to be made for everything that Walking Dead is doing, whereas I feel like Revolution is just irritatingly dumb.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the thing is also, it could be, if it wants to be an adventure show, that's fine. It's not even a very good adventure show. Like, there's a 5-minute sword fight that's, like, the worst staged sword fight I've ever seen. Yeah. You know, and it's
the person who will transparently betray you, betrays you.
Right. So, yeah.
As a science fiction fan, and, as a really dedicated, passionate science fiction fan, Revolution makes me really sad, because I think in between that and Terra Nova, we have these two shows that, are really high concept. I think, I'm sure Revolution is less expensive than Terra Nova, if only because they just need to do some CGI backgrounds instead of, big scary dinos. But there are these two shows that just feel really unthoughtful, and then I think are getting science fiction a bad name on network, and are going to get at this reputation of something that is expensive and can't sell. And that's unfortunate, because you can do stuff that's not that expensive, but that is interesting. But the networks have bet on shows that are dumb, And it's, Fox was going to do an adaptation of The Magicians that it passed on, which, that's, again, a show that could have been done with, some animation for magic, the way that Alphas works on Sci-Fi. And I also feel like the bad network Sci-Fi is taking thunder away from Alphas, which I think is terrific. But that's a side note.
I don't watch Alphas, so I will have to take your word for it.
You don't want to watch David Strathern be,
I do,
X?
but there's a lot of TV to watch. And
there is a lot of TV.
I feel like when I miss the beginning, sometimes I just have to let it go, and I'll get back there sometime. I mean, it's interesting though, because Last Resort, which is not really a sci-fi show, so Last Resort is a show on ABC from Sean Ryan, who's the guy who made The Shield, and the premise is essentially that a nuclear submarine helmed by Andre Braugher and Felicity Scott Speedman is asked to fire a nuke on Pakistan, and for various reasons it seems suspicious, and they refuse to do it, and then they're fired on, and essentially they declare they have a nuke, and they declare sort of
they have 17 nukes.
Right.
So they accurate.
Right. So they sort of declare independence because they're a nuclear power and land on this island, and the show is going to kind of be about, what happens next. And that is
it's a building a society from scratch narrative that, unlike Revolutions, is actually pretty interesting.
Right. And also, it has a lot of political. It will also be a sort of that, and also a political thriller conspiracy show. But the thing about that exactly is that isn't sci-fi, but it's much. It's sort of in the same family of a show as structurally as that kind of show, which is just we know there's going to be this long story. That we know there's things we don't know. We know that there's is a conspiracy in both of them. And it just seemed much. The pilot was just much better executed. So it's obviously that it's not. It is unfair to sci-fi because it's not that. It's just that is these are just bad versions of it, basically.
Yeah. Speaking of there being a lot of television, can we talk about some television we do like, particularly about Homeland, which is coming back on September 30th?
Yes.
You wrote this great profile of Mandy Patinkin for New York Magazine, and it sounds like it was kind of fun to hang out with him.
Oh, it was super fun. It was super fun. He's he talks a lot. He likes to talk. So it's fun to talk to him because he, has a lot of things to say. And he obviously, it's this funny thing about actors. I mean, this is such a stupid thing to say, but you read interviews, you kind of know what they're going to be like, but they're not, they're sort of, and the characters they play have elements of them, but they're totally also different. So basically, he looks like Saul, and he's sort of can be serious like him, but he just wants to chat and chat and chat, and he's thoughtful about it.
He said something really interesting in the interview about sort of doing Homeland, which is from Howard Gordon and Alex Gansa, who made 24, versus his experience doing Criminal Minds, which he quit, and sounds like it was very upsetting to him to do that show. And I was wondering if you could sort of tease that out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so he's a very emotional guy. I think I think he sort of. I think he sort of proudly wears his heart on his sleeve, and I think that's sort of how he thinks of himself. He was taught, he actually had spent a bunch of time in the Middle East, sort of recently shooting Homeland. He'd done some tours of Israel, had gone to the West Bank, where he'd been, 20 years before, and he's just thinking, and it seemed like that was a very emotional experience for him, and also that his reaction to that was he felt very much was not as a politician. He didn't want to speak about it in terms of politics, but just, he wanted to speak about it, sort of how he felt. So I think that he is sensitive, and I think that he has a reputation for that as well. And so yeah, and also as an actor, his sort of process, as ridiculous a word as that is, I think, is sort of just to think about it a lot and to be that person. So I think it was extremely emotionally taxing for him to just be on a show about serial killers all the time, as you could sort of imagine from watching that show. And So yeah, I mean, so I think he did just find it like kind of grueling and depressing, and I think, and one of the things he talked about a lot that sort of didn't make it into the piece was, I mean, it did a little bit, but one of the things about Homeland I think he's so loves and is so proud of is sort of like that it is, like when people watch it that aren't in America or are in America, it seems like it's gesturing in sort of a productive direction about like how we might all be able to talk to each other. And that seems really important to him. And I don't think that he feels like Criminal Minds sort of was like that, you know? And that he basically sort of wasn't like that proud to be part of it because he thinks it's putting out like something negative into the universe. Obviously, I'm sort of wildly paraphrasing him here, but it was a really long interview. You know, it seemed very felt for him, basically. And he seemed like he was really proud of Homeland, and I think that was nice for him.
Well, that's interesting because I've always felt like, to a certain extent, like Homeland was a bit of a sort of de-escalation or sequel to and reconsideration of some of the ideas in 24, which, you know, may or may not be true. But it's it's interesting that he sort of had that experience with a show that was very sort of exploitative of violence and then went to a show that is sort of about, you know, political violence and terrorism and religious violence, but that is very sort of thoughtful about it. And one of the things that I really like about Homeland is that it makes committing violence seem really scary. I mean, in the finale last season, we have all of this build up to the question of whether Nicholas Brody, this returned POW who was turned into a sleeper agent by Abu Nazir, this sort of Osama bin Laden-like figure, is going to set off a suicide vest. And the sort of sweaty anxiety of it, I thought was just fantastic. I mean, it's, you know, and he doesn't end up doing it, and there's this sort of de-escalation, but it makes pulling the trigger seem hard, and it doesn't just skip over to killing.
Right. Have you seen the first one of this year?
I have.
Have you seen the second one? They just sent it out today.
I haven't watched that one yet.
I thought the pilot was, I thought the first episode was really good. I'm a little more concerned after seeing the second one, but I obviously think that show's great. And like Breaking Bad, basically, is one of the two shows that sort of is walking this line of being like, you know, extremely thoughtful and rich and having these characters, and then just being like so fun sometimes. Like, just, it makes you feel crazy and weird and like you're watching an action movie. And that's really nice. That's entertaining, you know, it's good. It's good TV.
Well, I also feel like Homeland is really, I think really is the first show to kind of pull off a female anti-hero, and to pull off an anti-hero who is anti-heroic in sort of female-coded ways, right? I mean, I actually think, I have this new thing about anti-heroes, which is I think, like, we're using it wrong. Like, I think there's actually two things, and we're talking about different, like, an anti-hero is, like, a bad person who we care about. But Carrie's a hero. She just has some bad qualities. Like, she's just kind of crazy, and she does, you know, like, she does bad things sometimes, but she's a hero. And so is Saul. And it's not like they're, and so whatever we feel about them, you know, however complicated we do, it's actually safe to love her. And it doesn't implicate us, you know? I think you're right about that. And so, let me step back then. I still think in the sort of last 15 years of television, one of the reasons the show has resonated so strongly, even though I think it makes missteps and that it can be kind of pulpy, I think she is probably the best female dramatic character of this recent era. That may be too bold a claim.
No, I don't think it is. I mean, it's hard for me, honestly. One of the real failings of this TV era is it's not that easy to think of that many great female characters. I mean, certainly not ones as swaggering and dominating and, you know, fully on their own terms as she is. I mean, really, like Starbuck, I don't know, like, you know, Peggy, but
Patty Hughes, you know, but Damages which finished this summer, is just a much more flawed show. But yeah, I mean, Carrie, I think probably the reason that I and other people kind of misapply anti-hero to her is that she makes us feel some of the things that, you know, Tony Soprano and, you know, or even more like Stringer Bell, someone who sort of overreaches. I mean, I think she's a very Stringer Bell-like character in certain ways. Like, you know, she has certain parts of her emotional life that are just extremely underdeveloped, She sort of overreaches and sees herself as this expert. She does things, I mean, sort of like Stringer, or having D'Angelo killed is the equivalent of that for Carrie, is like deciding to bug Brody's house in the first place. It's this sort of intimate secret thing that they believe is absolutely necessary and that ends up having these sort of disastrous consequences. Yeah, I mean, I think Carrie's almost the opposite of what we think of as a conventional anti-hero. We look at someone like Walter White, whose ends we find abhorrent, but whose means we find sort of guiltily fascinating. And Carrie is the opposite of that. Like, she's constantly terrifying us that she's going to break the law or get herself in an enormous amount of trouble, even as we really want her to nail Brody if he is in fact guilty.
Right, well, yeah.
Well, yes. I mean,
the thing about Homeland that I'm a little concerned about, and actually sort of came up at the end of Breaking Bad as well, is that, and I understand this impulse, but this weird focus on plausibility. So both of these shows, and Breaking Bad much more. So Breaking Bad is a totally implausible show. Like, that's the thing about Breaking Bad. It's a gonzo TV show that a million things have already happened that don't make sense. And if you wrote them down, you'd be like, oh, this is crazy. Like, this is an insane soap opera. But the show has been so effective at pulling those off, and that they've been sort of so true to the characters and our characterization that basically, that we're sort of able to suspend our disbelief about them. And Homeland is similarly, you know, like, I think it's less implausible than Breaking Bad, but like Carrie and Brody have slept together now and are kind of in love, basically, and that's crazy. Like, that is a I buy it, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's going to be a really big theme in this coming year, but I don't, you know, it's a little implausible. And so this thing that happens, which happened with Breaking Bad, and I suspect is going to happen with Homeland in the second, starting very soon, just because there's all these plot mechanics that have to happen, is like people being, you know, not buying it. Obviously, some people buy it and some people don't, but this sort of like obsession with it being like buying these characters who just are already not really plausible doing these things. So it's like you're there, you know. And
I don't want to spoil the first episode for folks who haven't watched it yet, because we're still a couple weeks out. But there is one major plot thread running through the second season where I sat down with Alex and Howard and just said, this would never happen. And I don't mean to be obnoxious about it, but I cannot believe it would happen. Yeah. I can't.
And I mean that, and also that, which that is it's going to get, there's too many, it's like I worry with Homeland a little bit that it is going to succumb to almost being a conspiracy theory as a show. Like, not about a conspiracy theory, but to start to have so many coincidences that you just start to be like, this is implausible.
The mechanics of it are going to be sort of you either have to buy the conspiracy or you don't. Right. And I can see that.
Yeah, and also it was interesting to me about Breaking Bad. Not that people's feelings that that Walt would never have left, you know, in the finale he had left the Walt Whitman poems out for Hank to find, that he would never do that, or you know, or on the train episode, the heist episode, where they sort of took all this stuff for meth from a train, that was too precise. I mean, I think that those things were actually sort of true. I was surprised how much people were horrified by it not being plausible, given the actual ridiculousness of the show. It's sort of, you know, that it was like they had come so far that they had already in their own minds wiped out the things that are just implausible already.
Well, and I mean, these are shows that are aided by these incredibly emotionally precise central performances. I mean, you know, Bryan Cranston and Claire Danes are both totally remarkable and killing it in these particular roles. I mean, Walter White as this sort of tiny little man who believes he's raised himself up to greatness, this sort of moral midget. Or Carrie, you know, these are both people who are really believe they're right, and Walt's tragedy is that he's wrong, and Carrie's is that she's right but that she's not believed.
Right. No, totally. That's actually a totally, nicely said book, framing of them. I mean, the thing about Bryan Cranston that's also amazing is, the thing I can't believe is how you can tell just from his tone of voice whether Walter White thinks he's telling the truth. Whether Walter White thinks he's, is lying to someone. Whether Walter White is lying to someone but thinks he's telling the truth. Whether he's lying to himself. Or, like, there's literally, like, 4 things you can tell literally about how he feels about something. Like, if he's pretending to be nice, if he's being nice, if he's pretending to be a dick, if he's being a dick, if he's trying to, you know, like, just from how he says a line reading. And it's crystal clear, and it's crazy. Like, he's just so dialed into that guy and his horrifyingness that he can do that. And it's like, you know, it's funny because I'm also still surprised that people love that guy. Like, I think that's a great performance. I think Bryan Cranston's an amazing actor. That man, it's not even, like, he's supposed to die. He's not going to, I don't think, but get rid of that guy.
Yeah, I don't know. And whereas Carrie has her different tones of voice depend on sort of how clearly she believes, whether she believes she's being believed and whether she believes she's being seen. I mean, part of what's so devastating about that scene where, you know, David comes into her house and she's right. Like, she has got Brody dead to rights. Her serial killer, crazy person, like, string and paper in the basement thing has led her to the thing that's absolutely true.
Right.
And she just falls apart because she's not being believed. And it's like, I mean, what's happening to her is a form of gaslighting, right? I mean, because she's mentally ill, she's being told that she's wrong. And because people believe she's,
Well, also because she has no real evidence.
Yeah.
Like, she has a hunch. I mean, the thing is also, the difference also between her and Walter White is that Walter White is 100% controlled. I mean, he's not, you know, he loses his temper, does things, but Carrie is uncontrolled. Like, she can't control anything about herself. No, but I mean, I think, you know what, the thing also about the believed thing, and this is sort of what is such a twisted, awesome animating detail of her relationship with Brody, is the only person who knows she's right is him.
Yeah.
And that's, like, so amazing. And, you know, it's like, you would understand why he likes, like, his interest drawn to her, because it's like, she sees something in him. She's the only one who knows about him, which, you know, is alluring, but he's like, he is gaslighting her. So that's, I mean, that's just, like, so twisted and awesome. I, like, just think that's just, like, such an interesting thing.
Yeah,
and
they're sort of they're locked together by their ability to see each other.
Right.
And
I don't know. I'm excited for that start. What else do we like? Is there anything else that we liked? We haven't talked about the new normal, which we didn't like, but let's talk about something.
Yeah, well, I feel like we can let that go. I wanted to talk about one other thing that I think both of us, speaking of difficult women, which I think is a blanket term. I wanted to, we've been talking a lot about TV, but both of us read this book this summer, Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl, which I finished more recently. And it's this book that's been this sort of low-grade phenomenon, right? It's not 50 Shades of Grey, but it's the thing that people are reading.
It was the beach read of the summer. It's going to be a movie with Reese Witherspoon. It sold a lot of copies. It's like
it's sad to me that it's going to be Reese Witherspoon because Martha Plimpton would be so good.
Oh, but I think it's actually, I'm excited about it. It's been a really long time since she just willingly, like, played the full B, and I think I think she'll be up to it.
I want to label this a heavy spoiler alert for Gone Girl.
Yeah, please stop listening
the only way to talk about Gone Girl, really the only way to talk about Gone Girl, is to talk about the twist in the middle.
Yeah.
And the reason it's interesting that Witherspoon is playing this role is that it's a book about a woman who goes missing. And for the first half of the novel, it's told from the perspective of her husband after she goes missing, and through this diary that she's written that sort of tells the story of her falling in love with him and him sort of falling out of love with her, especially after they move back to Missouri where he grew up. And then halfway through the book, we find out that she's a crazy psychopath who has engineered this entire situation to punish him for cheating on her. And she's going to ruin his life, but she can't resist telling him that she's going to ruin his life. And so he sort of figures it out. And the twist.
Well, it's not just for cheating on her. Basically, so through the first half of the book, he's being framed for murder, and you don't know if he did it because he kind of hates her. You think he maybe did it,
yeah.
And then it becomes real that she's actually just a sociopath. So
she's done this before. She's framed other people,
right?
For, like, pushing her down the stairs,
right?
Yeah,
and basically so he did have an affair, but basically she's also just sick.
And I think was
he's
sort
sick
of
of him because she's been
and did a bunch of shitty things to her.
Right. No, but also they got together because she essentially was pretending to be. She's basically a genius. She's like a serial killer. She just doesn't kill people.
Yeah.
So she's extremely adept at being what people want her to be. So she essentially made herself into his version of his perfect girl. He fell in love with her. She did it for 2 years, and then she became so furious with him for essentially not liking the real her, who she had never shown herself to be to him, and is basically a horrible person. And this sort of fueled her anger at him. And so and they're in a horrible relationship. He does start to cheat on her, and that sort of flips it for her. But she's been dishonest with she's a totally slippery, dishonest human who is sort of incapable of being kind of kind, and is certainly incapable of being herself.
But one of the things I think that is interesting about the book is that she doesn't have a self, right? And I actually thought that this was sort of...
Well, have you read the Zadie Smith? Wait, have you read the Zadie Smith book? Because this is
I haven't read the Zadie Smith
book. Well, so just in the Zadie Smith book, the sort of character talks all the time about how she doesn't have a self, in the same way kind of that Amy does. But of course, as you're reading, any book you're reading that has a first-person narrator, it's impossible to believe that. Do you know what I mean? They do have a self.
The thing is, because Amy thinks she has this self. She complains that Nick fell for cool Amy instead of real Amy. But all of real Amy is defined in negative tropes. Her parents have written this series of books about her that, I actually thought were sort of a weakness because they sounded so dumb that I don't think they'd ever have been the hit that they were sort of made out to be. But, she insists she's not like real Amy. She's not what this high school boyfriend of hers wanted her to be. She's not cool Amy. But she really feels kind of empty to me. She doesn't actually feel, she has a psychology degree and is writing women's magazine quizzes, which again is not really her. And I couldn't get a handle on who she was and who she thought was being rejected.
I guess I think that the thing about that is that she sort of had never been herself, right? That's sort of she's always been pretending to be other people. So she's never been herself in the world. So she basically, herself is defined only as a thing she's not, because she's never actually put it out there. And that herself is this sort of really toxic, manipulative, negative, horrible person, who would maybe, and sort of at the end, we're kind of led to believe that she's sort of, and we can get there. I thought the ending wasn't so good, but that she had sort of softened to him in some sort of way because he was putting up with her.
Well, she's almost, I think her conclusion is sort of that he is her masterwork, right? And he, to a certain extent, reaches the same conclusion.
We should just say this. So basically, she's this horrible psychotic bitch who basically we learn has framed him for murder, and then essentially she gets away with it because he has, through various plot mechanics, he will also get in trouble if it's revealed what happened. So they end up living together and having a baby. Yeah. Which, holy shit, that woman should not have children.
Right, and it's this, they sort of come to this conclusion. She kind of decides that he is this person that she can, kind of hurt in a concentrated way, but that both that he knows her and provides something that she can kind of build a personality off of, or in opposition to, right? Because if her personality is just in opposition to things, then the person that she becomes when she's in opposition to him is sort of as decent as she ever gets. Yeah. And he kind of decides to stay with her because she's a way of avoiding becoming his father, who is this, very sort of generalized misogynist. And if he stays with Amy, he can be very clear that he just hates this one woman instead of hating women as a whole. They kind of totally deserve each other.
They do, but I did, I think we talked about this, but I got extremely bored, basically. I thought it's the first 150 pages you, can't read fast enough. And then you're she's a crazy
this really
bitch.
Wrenching portrait of America.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you're really she's psycho. And it gets really, really boring because it's just Deus Ex Machina psycho, You're just okay.
Deus Ex psycho bitch.
Right. And then, you read for a little more and then I'm really religious about sort of finishing books and I like that. But I was just by the end I was oh, I get it. I get it. I get it, and I don't really need to. I sort of skimmed it. It fell off a cliff really fast for me. Not that it wasn't interesting. I just, it's she's a bad person. There's only so many.
Right. Well, and it's a book that kind of decides that the fact that she is. It's almost as if I felt like it was almost old-fashioned in a way. It's we've revealed a woman to be a psychopath, and that's they feel like doing that is very daring, right? It's like they you know, revealed this thing that women aren't supposed to be, and she is that. And then there's sort of nothing else there, right? I mean, you know, she's kind of sui generis. And I was kind of thinking, did you ever read We Need to Talk About Kevin?
Yeah, I did.
I love that book, and I've been returning to it a lot recently.
It's an amazing book, and also it has a twist, and its twist is much more
devastating.
Yeah. Totally.
But part of what's interesting to me about sort of that in contrast to Gone Girl is that, I mean, Ava Cacciatore, the main character, and We Need to Talk About Kevin, is sort of like Nick. She is the mother of a boy who's revealed right from the beginning is a school shooter. And the end of the book is sort of the same way, that she decides that despite the fact that she and her son have never really bonded, she loves her son. She is going to let him come live with her when he gets out of prison. And, I mean, it's sort of freed from the trick of Gone Girl, which is that Nick is afraid, basically, that Amy will kill him or send him to prison. Even knows that Kevin will never hurt her because he loves her. She is the only person who's ever seen him for what he is, which is this crazy, scary person. And she sort of knew that from the beginning. And so it's...
And also, the other difference is just, and this is a thing about this is what the main character we need to talk about Kevin is grappling with, is just what do you owe somebody as their mother that you don't owe them as, their husband or wife, which is right. The fact that she's incapable of loving her son, which she is, and it may be because he's a horrible person, is also implicitly maybe why he's a horrible person. There's no actual, it's told from her right. perspective, but there is, that is a theme of that book, which is like, what is the cause here and what is the effect? Yeah. And so she does have to take him in this way, that these two people do not actually, they do not have to be miserable together right. forever, They're
sort of bound together by this barbed wire of the trick, which is that, she's actually a killer. Whereas when you talk about Kevin, you actually see why these people, and part of what's scary and interesting and very detailed about the book is you sort of see how these people grow together. Like, Kevin just appreciates that his mother will be very blunt with him about the fact that she thinks he's a bad person. And also that he knows, I mean, again, sort of like
Brody and Carrie, yeah.
Carrie and Homeland, yeah. They see each other clearly. Like, Kevin calls his mother out on being sort of a fraud and being mean to people. She broke his arm as a kid, so she's done something bad to him. They know each other, but there's someone to know. And I feel like with Gone Girl, there's just not really any of Nick and Amy to know once the plot mechanism has revealed itself.
Yeah. I thought, it's very fun. It was, very fun to read half of that book. And then it felt sort of like, it was just a solution, not the solution. Yeah. Not that I have any idea what, this is hard. I don't know what the good feeling right. solution would have been, but it sort of didn't feel like that.
Yes. Well, and on that sort of grim note, we're at the point where our files, I think, are going to be too big to be uploaded, so we should probably sign off. Talking. But in conclusion, everything is ruined forever.
Totally. Everything.
Hopefully next week television will be better. We can really try it.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. It will be better next week. Parks is coming back, so it'll be fine.
It always is. Well, thanks so much, Willa.
Oh, thank you.
For coming on.
All right, it's good to talk to you. Bye.
All right. Bye.